Okay, let's finish up with chapter 16. We were talking about the treatment of mentally ill early in history. Here we see some images where they would take the mentally ill person and spin them around. They would drop them through trapdoors. They would put them in freezing tubs filled with ice. This idea that something shocked the person into mental illness and maybe they could shock the person out of mental illness. Here we see the latest ride at Disneyland. No, that's not true. Here we see psychosurgery, early psychosurgery, trephination, and this is called the tranquilizing chair. The idea is to immobilize the person and keep them still so that the spell or fit will pass, so to speak, and they could be there for hours to days. Right? So clearly, our asylums, madhouses, this is a painting here, were horrible places. The treatment was horrible. And we often, when we're faced with huge problems in the world, we often think, what can I do? I'm just one person, right? But we have multiple instances of one person starting a movement, starting things. And one of those people is a person by the name of Philippe Pinel. Philippe Pinel recognized, look, why don't we take the time to treat people with dignity and respect? If you treat somebody like an animal, how do you expect them to act, right? So here we see a painting, a rendition of the chains being taken off a mentally ill person. I'm not going to lie to you and say, oh, well, everything, the music started playing, it turned into a Disney ending and everybody was cured and went home. But people did respond to fresh air, quality food, kindness, as opposed to you're acting inappropriate. Let's chain you up. Let's beat you up. When you need to take a bath, let's just squirt you down with with a water hose. An American who's a school teacher, right? Dorothea Dix, also looked at what was going on in our mental institutions here in the States and said, this is wrong. We've got to make changes. So this started the process of deinstitutionalization, this notion of getting people off the streets, getting them the quality help, but not locking them up in these institutions, treating them properly, and then releasing them back into the community. Do you remember the case study of Freddie the Catatonic? Well, he was a product of the process of deinstitutionalization. All those 12 schizophrenics that lived in that household had spent between 5 to 30 years in a mental facility. The idea, started by President John F. Kennedy in 1964 and continued with presidents thereon, was to get the people back into the community. Now, the general public was in favor of it. They said, that's great. We could save money. It's extremely expensive to keep somebody locked away in an institution, but not in my neighborhood, right? Put them someplace. And so where did they wind up putting a lot of these folks? Urban areas, college towns. They figured on a Saturday night, who can tell the difference between sororities and fraternities and the mentally ill? A lot of renters. So if you have less homeowners, there's less complaints about folks roaming the streets. The institution was a great idea. People do respond better in society versus locked in institutions. The problem with that is that we just let people go and a lot of them fell through the cracks. Today, we see people walking the streets, pushing the carts, talking to themselves, and they're not getting any help at all. So there's been some failures. Right? So treatment has varied over the years. We tried folks who implemented things like hypnosis to try, and even Sigmund Freud tried this technique and abandoned it over time because not everybody can be hypnotized, right? Eventually, we came up with psychotherapy. And the process of psychotherapy is assessing, listening. I always say if you're going to be a good therapist, you have to have some key skills. And one of them, of course, is listening, the ability to listen. Now, of course, Freud, going for a circle like we did from the first chapter, Freud would sit behind his patients and listen, exploring the past, right? With this psychoanalysis, also known as psychodynamic, exploring the past, human relationships, parental upraising, anything to tap into the unconscious. Then we have the humanistic folks, if you remember those folks, trying to reach the top of that pyramid. What was it called? Self-actualization. Carl Rogers and Company. You ever see Rogers sitting in the end in a group session, sharing similar issues, maybe exploring possible solutions. This notion of getting people deinstitutionalized and exposing them to the environment, fresh air, calming effects of nature, it's run full circle. Here's an article from the National Geographic 2014 where some patients are taken over there by the local river and exposed to nature, right? Music can heal the soul. If you remember Oliver Sacks, the man who wrote the book, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, he writes an article about the healing powers of music. And you know as well as I know that music not only changes brain chemistry, but just changes our mood, right? Behaviorists focusing on the behavior themselves. And of course, we have a wide variety of techniques. Most of our parents use some of those techniques: punishment, reinforcement. When Freddie was in the house, they actually used this behavioral technique called token economy right over here, where certain residents who were able to perform certain chores in the house were given tokens or rewards so they could cash those in for a milkshake at the Wolverine Cafe down the street, so to speak. Cognitive folks focusing on changing your thinking, right? If you're thinking to yourself, man, there's no way I can learn through this remote process. There's no way I can learn through watching videos and taking notes and so on and so forth. Well, you have to change your style of thinking because that could produce a self-fulfilling prophecy. As I mentioned, that my style changed to the behavioral cognitive, kind of combining those two schools, right? Getting people to think, but also focusing on some very measurable goals, things that are very concrete, working through therapy a little bit faster. Let me show you about phobias, because phobias comes up once in a while, and most of us know somebody with a phobia. They experience some kind of phobic response, and that's a pretty normal phenomenon. So I'm going to tell you about a technique called systematic desensitization, right? Never say that word, systematic desensitization, with your mouth full of water. All right, so we'll call this woman Mary, and she has a fear of spiders. So what do we call her phobia? That's right, arachnophobia. Right. For those who have arachnophobia, I'm sorry, I showed pictures of when I was Spider-Man. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a step-by-step process to systematically desensitize Mary from her fear. So first we show her a rubber spider, right? She gets a little uncomfortable with that. But over time and a lot of positive reinforcement, we're telling her what a great job she's doing, she moves on to look at a picture. I'm sorry, I'm going backwards. We look at a picture here, and then she holds the picture, then the rubber spider. Okay. Then we hold the rubber spider. We get her to hold the spider. Remember, this is taking time with lots of positive reinforcers. Then she sees the real spider. Now, we're not going to move forward until she tells us we're ready. That's one of the beautiful things about systematic desensitization. We don't move until she's ready to move. We hold the real spider, and for somebody who couldn't even look at a picture of a spider, she's now holding the spider. You notice the last image is missing. What happened was the spider bit her and she died, but that's irrelevant. I see this as a success story. Kidding aside, systematic desensitization is so successful. The problem is people don't want to do it because they have to face eventually their fear stimulus. And I can understand that, right? So, doc, what's my prognosis? Remember the cases of the 4 schizophrenics. Prognosis is, will the person get better? And that's a very complicated question to answer, right? Will they get better? It really depends on a lot of circumstances. One, the environment, the support network, the person's compliance with treatment, right? When it comes to things like systematic desensitization, right, you can see if somebody has no treatment, they don't get better at all. If they give a placebo, here, take this magic pill, turns out to be a Flintstone vitamin, right? If they have some insight therapy, they get a little bit better. But systematic desensitization, excellent. If you've been feeling kind of down, a little sluggish, try aerobic exercise in any form or fashion, from doing jumping jacks to dancing to your favorite tune. Folks that don't do anything, no treatment whatsoever, they stay pretty much depressed. People that try relaxation groups, they get a little bit better. People that do aerobic exercise get really better. Why? Biochemically, we're changing, right? We're getting those endorphins going through our body. And I'll tell you, when I listen to my good tunes and I get moving, and whether it's cleaning up the house or working in the yard and pulling weeds, and I can see some success, I feel better. I may feel tired, but I feel better, right? You do what's best for you. Unfortunately, people who are depressed are the least person like to go for a walk, for example. So sometimes you are good friends with somebody who you know is kind of down. You just have to kind of grab them and say, we're going. We're going to start dancing. We're going to go for that walk, whatever the case might be. I hope these are helpful tips to you. So those who are thinking about a future being a therapist, you have to be a good listener. If you're able to listen to all these videotapes and make it through, I think you're off to a good start. You got to be not judgmental. You have to remember that the person is in this place and they just need some time to get out of this place, right? Which means you have to be respectful of that person. A lot of people think it's just sitting and just nodding your head and then charging them $100, $150, $200 an hour. It's not quite that simple. I think of therapy as an art and a science. Get better at it like you do at most things, the more you do it. But you gotta have those papers. You gotta have your bachelor's, your master's, your doctor's, depending on what level of treatment you want to do. You gotta get that licensure. Is it doable? You better believe it. Okay, now for the questions. I want you to describe the history of my own therapeutic experience. Be as detailed as possible. You folks know I love that detail. Second question, I want you to describe the history of deinstitutionalization in this country and give us your opinion. Do you think if it worked or not? I wish you the best, and I know you're going to do amazing on the last exam. Thank you.